The following program is made possible by Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Hillary Clinton wants to be the first woman to be elected president, but at the same time, the number of women in elective office continues to flatline. The topic is women campaigns and elections. The game is politics. The game is on. I'm Mark Simon. Welcome to the game. Mary Hughes is president of Hughes And Company, a leading political consulting firm, and founder of Close the Gap California, a campaign to increase the number of progressive women in the California Legislature. She also founded the 2012 Project for the Center for American Women in Politics with a similar nationwide goal following a 2010 election cycle in which the number of women in state legislatures dropped by more than 60. Mary, welcome back to the games. Nice to have you here. Let's start by talking about woman's favorite candidate, Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. It's been a wild summer.
It has been a wild summer. There are people who say that all he's doing is articulating, if that's the right word, what
generous.
A lot of people already think the Republican Party thinks about women anyway. He's very dismissive of them. The Megyn Kelly incident, in many ways, showed a side of him toward women that you think he may not have shown toward men. So what do you think, what do you make of all of this, I guess is the question.
Well, a couple things. One, I actually think it's helpful. I think the more direct, open, and honest candidates are, the quicker you get to evaluate and dismiss them. So I think part of the overall Trump package is this dismissiveness of women and contentiousness, particularly contentiousness with women, I think. And that is a tremendous gift to the Democrats, who have enjoyed a gender gap in presidential elections for the last 8 cycles, I think, and the largest gender gap in 2012. So that can do nothing but send intelligent women into the Democratic ranks. So bring it on.
Do you, and then of course the latest episode was his commenting on Carly Fiorina's face, which you don't normally hear that kind of rhetoric on the campaign trail.
You know, all of these insults, this one included, I think mask something that you can't mask for very long, which is the lack of something to contribute to the serious dialogue. So you've got a kid in the back of the class who's kind of funny, and the first 10 jokes around, everybody's amused, you know, but by Halloween of the first semester, it's tedious. And it's tedious. And eventually you've got to have something to contribute or the conversation bypasses you. And I think this fall, by Halloween, the conversation will have moved on.
You think he won't be a factor in the campaign?
I believe he will be a factor, but the fact that Bobby Jindal felt so comfortable this week saying this man is not a serious candidate, I believe you're going to hear more of that, because I think that the credible candidates need to take a stand. And for some of the ones like Jindal who are not really registering with voters, that's a way to say, I'm going to distinguish myself from this nonsense.
We're in such a different campaign environment, though. I mean, one of the things that's been so notable is how completely he has dominated the free media coverage, the TV news coverage. You think that runs its course, or because he seems capable of continuing? He's dominated it for a lot longer than a lot of people thought he was going to.
Agreed, but it has been the summer, which is a slow time. You also have to remember that our patience with politics is just enormous. We have the longest election cycles. They run forever. And we have had a series of really not competitive people rise and fall. Santorum and Huckabee on the Republican side, for example, who were leading at this point, or leading in Iowa at this point, or contenders, and faded really quickly. He is different in that I think he is much more of a showman, that he has a following that has nothing to do with politics, and I don't think that following leaves him. But I do think that the conversation will have to move on, and he has shown nothing to suggest he can make a serious competitor in a serious conversation about policy.
Yeah. You know, polls 5 or 6 months before even the Iowa caucuses don't tell you much except sort of a snapshot in time as a standard statement. But it does appear that he's tapped into some sentiment that appeals to people on some level, whether it's anger, however you would describe it. How would you describe it? And do you think that's valid, that he's tapped into something?
It's several things. It's very interesting. If you look at the most recent polls, there is the cadre of non-elected competitors, and Trump, Carson, and Fiorina.
Non-office holders, yes.
Those folks are collectively at more than 50% of the Republican preference at this point. So clearly anti-elected, clearly more authentic, and more interested in people who are bringing something from outside the political arena into it. Now, how those particular professions, neurosurgeon and CEO, stack up in the long run, we don't know. But right now, they collectively represent, and their followers represent, an expression of dissatisfaction, anger, and rejection of the current political class.
And isn't that widespread? I mean, you see national polls that show, inexplicably, because the economy is in better shape than it's been in a long time, unemployment is lower than it's been in a long time, but you see a widespread discontent. It may not be strong enough to call it anger, but you see a lot of people who are not comfortable with the way things are going.
Well, there are two things that, there are a lot of things at work. Some is dissatisfaction with the status. The wage gap grows, the economy, some good signs, but a lot of people don't feel an uptick in the economy. There's a dissatisfaction, of course, with the slowness there. But I actually think it has more to do with the popular culture situation that you referenced earlier. You know, with 24-hour coverage of politics and political leaders, there is a sameness among the droning descriptions of the day-to-day of the opposition parties, the stalemate in Congress, the stalemates on various issues, the failure to move on immigration, the failure to move on climate change. Important issues, the failure to move on the wealth gap. And I think people have heard every possible phrase from elected officials about what could and should be done, and they are both inured to the rhetoric and very unhappy with no movement. Along come three people who speak differently. They don't use the same words. They talk differently about these circumstances. They bring a different approach. They aren't coached and therefore appear authentic or more authentic. And I think we are in a place where authenticity, which has always been extremely valuable to voters, is at a real premium. So the fact that three outsiders come in and talk directly about these issues or differently, or in Donald Trump's case, bombastically, but nonetheless, not using the same old, tired words that they hear all the time, I think that that is appealing. It's momentarily attractive. And so that difference is a big factor in why we see the spread we do right now.
Well, we're going to talk about authenticity and Hillary Clinton in just a second. We're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. Over here is Mary Hughes of Hughes and Company, and also Close the Gap California, which is a program to try and bring more women to the legislature in the next election. We were talking about authenticity in candidates, and that leads to the subject of Hillary Clinton, because I think a lot of the things that people find discomforting about her is that they don't think they see the real her. And I know you and I have both been at events where we've seen her, small events, and she's a lot different than she seems to be at events, at big events where she's making a speech, and certainly in the context of when she's trying to explain why she got her emails all screwed up. So how does that issue work for her? And then I want to segue from there to, is there a women's vote? Is it solidly behind her?
Mrs. Clinton, there are several things going on, I think, with Secretary Clinton. The first is, when you are a highly accomplished woman, which she is, and it sometimes helps to remember that she has been a first lady, a remarkably effective lawyer, an advocate for children, a senator from New York, a Secretary of State. So let's just stipulate this is an accomplished woman. There is, among many accomplished women of our generation, a concern about being perfect. And that it does two things for women candidates that can be actually not as helpful as if you were perfect. And one is the worry about being perfect makes you less comfortable about recognizing everybody makes mistakes, everybody flubs up, and the sort of joy of we're all in this together, we're all just people, eludes you. I think that's part of what you're seeing. This is a very accomplished person who wants to do everything really right and who has tried to do everything by the book. And that's what she believes, that's who she is, and that real intensity, it would sometimes be easier for all of us if instead of 90 days or 120 days of, gee, I wish I'd used 2 servers, if you set it on the second day, maybe we could be on to more productive things. But if you believe so strongly that you've tried to do it right and that you did it by the book and that you did it the way other people did it, then you really want to make your case for that. So I understand it, but I don't think it served her well.
What's interesting about that, though, is the impression she ends up leaving is that she wasn't doing it by the book and that she's trying to evade being responsible for that.
I understand it. That's why I think it's much simpler. That's why I think in many ways people came to have affection for her husband, flaws and all, because in the end, it was kind of a, you know, I'm trying, you know who I am, and I'm good at what I do, and she's really good at what she does, and I think that will out over the course of this election. But the rocky start hasn't been helpful. But there's something else at work. I'm not a very good tennis player, maybe you are, but when you play tennis with people who aren't as good as you are, you don't play a very good game of tennis. Right now in the Democratic primary system, she's playing with folks who are not really in her league. So she's not only not playing a great game, she's not even on her game in terms of her ability to move voters or make a case for herself. So I actually think that the notion of her being intimidated by the tightening up of the race with Bernie Sanders, for example, I think that notion is wrong. I think that this will sharpen and focus her. I think she will come out the way she did toward the end of the 2008 elections when she was in it and competitive in Pennsylvania and really fighting. I think that is a Hillary Clinton who is very real, very passionate, and people felt very drawn to.
Yeah. Well, the instructive thing I've learned today is a political approach based on, you know, that great philosopher Popeye, I am what I am.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about what does it mean to have a woman at the top of the ticket, or presumably at the top of the ticket, for the work you're doing. First of all, does it draw more women to the polls, and does that help bring women to elective office?
Well, we're plowing some new ground here, so we don't really know a lot of these answers. Here's what I can tell you. Here's what I can tell you. In the primaries in 2008, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton split women. Older women were with Clinton, younger women were with Obama, and middle-aged women split pretty evenly between us. Gender is not really the determinant for women. Party is. The Democrats have been enjoying a bigger and bigger slice of that 53% of the vote that is female.
Let me stop you there for a second, because one of the presumptions in politics is that there are certain blocks, you know, the first Asian to run is going to get the Asian vote, such as it is. The first Latino is going to get the Latino vote.
Right.
So what you're saying is the first thing we shouldn't say is that there's a women's vote?
Well, the first thing we should say is that we don't know. We know that Barack Obama got something upwards of 90% of the African American vote.
Right.
We know that he got the lion's share of the vote among communities of color. But that's really the first time we tested that, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what we know. We know that women have been drawn to the Democratic Party. They have never had a woman at the top of the ticket, so that we could see, does this gender gap get a bump up? For a Democratic woman, the gender gap is there. And will it bump up on account of the gender of the candidate? We don't know yet. I think there is some reason to believe that will happen, but I think that will close very close to the end of the race. I don't think that it will formulate or be obvious at the beginning.
So what does that mean to the work you're doing trying to get women to run? Does it set a role model? Does it provide an example? Or do they look at what she's going through and think, I want nothing to do with that?
Actually, most of the progressive women that we work with in Close the Gap, California, are motivated by what they see happening in their own communities. Mm-hmm. They appreciate what they learn from women who have run for governor or mayors of big cities or now for president, and they understand that situation. But their motivation doesn't come from wanting to be one of the gang or one of the women who's running. These women are motivated by the circumstances they see in their communities, and those generally have to do with the qualities of the public schools, the environment, the number of people in poverty or homelessness, issues having to do with literacy. They're concerned in California about the bigness and unwieldiness of managing solutions, and they believe in local, but they know they can't do it without Sacramento.
Let me stop you there. We're going to take another break. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. Mary Hughes is here, political consultant and founder of Close the Gap California, a campaign to elect more women to the legislatures, to the legislature in California. Progressive women, not
progressive women.
Progressive
yes.
women. So we talked a little bit about whether or not Hillary Clinton's candidacy represents sort of a rising tide. Does it lift all boats? And you said we don't know yet, and that's not necessarily why women run. Let's talk a little bit about on the Republican side, because there is a woman running who has done very well early on in terms of the impression she's made. What's your assessment of her as the Republican version of a women candidate?
Well, I think she's got a very clear distinction from the rest of the field, and I don't think it's gender.
Yeah.
I think that she is one of the most articulate about both her conservative views and about what she would do. She has very clearly thought through what's important, And she is able to articulate that. She also has demonstrated an ability to go toe-to-toe with any of the others and give no quarter. And that is really important in the world that she operates in, because there isn't that same, there aren't other women around, there aren't, she's out there by herself.
Yeah. The concern you've been having, and you've been having it for a while now, we were talking off the camera about this issue really beginning to be of concern to you in 2007, heading toward the 2012 reapportionment. Why are women losing standing? Why are they losing numbers?
Well, let's be careful, because it's not so much that we're losing. So we passed the 100 mark in the U.S. House this year. I think there are 104 women members of the 435 members of the House. So that's a high water mark, and that's been consistently but incrementally increasing over time.
Incrementally is another word for slow?
Yes.
Yeah.
Glacial. Yeah. Glacial would be good. Yeah. So the Senate has 20 women, so 20%. That's also terrific. But this has taken us a long time, and I think part of the problem is in 1992, when here in California we sent Barbara Boxer and Dianne Feinstein, our own Anna Eshoo, to Congress. That was the year of the woman, and we thought, okay, we get this. We've broken through. Now it's a short trip to parity. We're going to be represented in these legislative bodies in the same percentage we are out here in the world. And that didn't happen. And in California, over the last decade, we actually went from 31% of our legislature down to 26%. And that decline is a result of many things. Surely, the increase in the amount of money that it takes to run is a deterrent to lots of people. But for women who start often with fewer networks of supporters who have access to funds, I think it is a big consideration. I think the notion that women want to get something done, and they look to Sacramento and they say, I'm not sure. I don't exactly get what they're doing up there. A little hard to tell. But you know what? There's tons I can do right here in my community and actually see that I'm getting stuff done. So I think the notion of work product, very important to women, and they're not sure that there's work product that they could be satisfied with. So I think that's a deterrent as well. Of course, there's always the 24-hour news cycle, the intrusiveness into your privacy and your family's privacy. There is the issue of the negativity of most campaigns. But I'll tell you a problem we should all focus on and be concerned about. Under the current campaign finance scheme, many of our legislative races are being determined by huge amounts of money spent by outside forces that neither carry the message of neither campaign, but come in order to pluck out the person they think who will be most willing to do their bidding in the legislature, pour money in to be helpful or to oppose the other candidate. And that is very dangerous. And I think that fact is very clear to many of the women that I work with, that it is a risk. You do not control your own destiny.
But if your goal is to increase the numbers, then shouldn't your campaign be focused on those contributors, those donors, those independent expenditure individuals, and say, you need to pick more women?
You know, we took a very narrow approach, and that was first, find the absolute best candidate, the most prepared, recruit the most prepared, the most purposeful women we can find, and then there are many organizations out there who work with donors, who train candidates, who raise money for candidates. We focus on one thing. We have all these open seats. Last time, we're going to have a lot of open seats in California till 2022 and 24, because everybody we've elected after this cycle will be there, if they want, for 12 years. So we have to move women in, because whatever the picture is after the 2016 election, our legislature is likely to look like that until 2024. Mm-hmm. So this is a big opportunity. And the fact that it coincides with possibly having a woman at the top of the ticket made it imperative that we take a chance here.
So do you have a target number for how many seats you'll pick up?
You know, I'm happy to tell you we originally targeted 16 open seats. I think 1 or 2 of them actually might be swing seats, but for the vast majority we're open. And at this point, 12 of those seats have, I think, 15 progressive women running in them. We're close, working with 4 women in 4 other districts who are in the process of making decisions. And so we added 4 more seats. So there are 20 seats in which we hope to field competitive progressive women, and we're on target to do that.
You talked about sort of recruiting women. It's a little different. In that there's a pause where they think, I'm not sure this is what I want to do or where I can be effective. And my sense is that maybe men don't spend a lot of time pausing over some of those same questions. Are women candidates different? How are they different, other than gender?
They are. Over the years, I've had the pleasure to work with women running for legislative and executive office, and there are several traits that are similar. They want to know everything before they venture forth. So the debate preparation for men and women candidates totally different. Men are willing to go out there and wing it. Women feel very uncomfortable with the idea that you'd wing anything. It's what this work is. They get it, that it's important to that first grade classroom, that it's important to the health of people, that it's important to people's retirement security. That is front and center. Less readily accessible are the art of campaigning. What levers do you pull to be good at the politics of this? And more important is what you can actually do for people.
So I'm going to have to stop you there.
Yeah.
We're out of time.
Oh.
So this is a subject we could talk about for quite a while, but we're going to have to stop now. Thank you, Mary Hughes, for being with us, and thank you for being with us, and join us next time on The Game.